Hi there, and welcome back to one of my SketchUp videos. In this video I want to show you how you can actually make jewelry out of SketchUp. Particularly pendants and necklaces. And the idea is, of course, that you need to get them fabricated somewhere. But from SketchUp you can export any 3D shape very nicely as an STL file, which allows you to 3D print this. There are a few web services out there that can even 3D print in precious metals, silver, etc., etc. And so you can actually create some really nice, intricate geometry right in SketchUp and then make a really nice present out of it. And of course, this would be a personalized present. So we're going to work with, names, etc. All right, so let's get going. So this works in SketchUp Pro and the web version, except for when it comes to balancing things. That's where I'm going to use an extension, the Face Centroid extension that I wrote a little while ago. That comes in really handy for something like this. And then that only, of course, installs on the installed or Pro version of SketchUp, whether it's Mac or Windows, doesn't matter, but it won't work on the web version. Although some of this, the 3D text part, you can definitely do with the web version as well. Okay, so if you need that extension, you have to go to Extension Warehouse, right from SketchUp. You can just search for Centroid, and then it comes up. It's right there. And then from there, you'll just install it. You can kind of see up here in the image what happens. It calculates the accurate centroid of any shape, and it'll draw some crosshairs on that. And that'll be really important for us to create something that is supposed to balance and not tilt to one side. Okay, so let's assume you have that installed and you're ready to go. All right, so let's start with a pendant, basically. And we're going to assume you do something with a letter. And I'm just going to pick A as a default. Pick whatever you need to create that present that you're after. In any case, so I'm going to keep my dimensions pretty big right now, 10 inches height, 1 inch extrusion. We can adjust this all later. We can scale this back up and down however we want to. Obviously, we won't make it this big, but that's one start. Sometimes also in SketchUp, small geometry gets a little iffy, so it actually helps to start large or create something large and then scale it down just before you export it. Okay, so I'm going to just place that A right there, and you get the point, of course, of what I want to do. Now I have something that has a fairly strong horizontal line there that's supposed to obviously hang in the balance. It's supposed to end up horizontal and not lean over one way or another. Okay. In order to turn this into a necklace or pendant, we of course need some kind of a loop that we can hook a chain through, and I'm gonna just make this a group, or that we could put another ring through and then put a chain through. There's all kinds of ways, of course, how you can make this, but ultimately you need some way to attach this letter to the chain. Okay, so now I have the loop ready, and I made it as a solid group. I just carefully modeled it, extruded it, push-pulled it, and then turned it into a group. And then the A from the 3D text tool already came in as a solid component. Those usually do, but every once in a while you need to adjust that, and we'll go over that in a minute too. Okay, so now we've got the two components. I'm going to go back into top view because now this loop needs to be in a position where it balances the whole thing. And for that, we need the centroid. Okay, so let's find the centroid. So I'm going to double click on the group or the component that has the A in it. So now I'm right in there, and I actually have the face right there, the top face of that A. And if I right click on that and click on Get Face Properties, that should give me the centroid. It actually asks for the centroid. However, there's one quick warning that there are internal holes. And the way that the algorithm works is that you need to identify these internal openings. So right now you do have a perimeter of the entire face, kind of goes around the outside here. And then you have these internal openings. And in order for the algorithm to correctly calculate or consider these openings, you just need to draw a line from the inside to the outside. A channel, if you want to call it that way. But it really just has to be a line, nothing more than that. So every internal piece has to have a line to the perimeter, just like this. So now I have that for those two pieces. Now I can again single click my face, and I just have this front face highlighted. It's nicely shown, obviously. Then I can right click on it, and I can click on Get Face Properties. It'll ask me again to draw a crosshair, so I'm going to say yes, and there it is. All right, so now we don't need these little lines anymore, so I can get rid of those, and I can get out of my group or component here, and now I get the face properties. They actually show up quite nicely. So in case you needed to ever get the actual dimension of the centroid or the area, or perimeter, or any of the structural properties, feel free to get them from there. But for us, we won't need it, so I'm actually going to delete that bit. And now we have a location of the centroid and basically our vertical axis and our horizontal axis. All right, so this makes aligning the supporting bit right here very easy, because now all I need to do is go into my Move tool, snap on to the center point, and then I can place it right here at the center, or the centroid actually. Okay, so now obviously I won't make it like this, but this is a starting point, and now from there I just simply move up vertically until I'm happy where it's supposed to go. So I do like a little bit of overlap between those two. You may not want to have too little, but depending on the manufacturing technique, somewhere in between should work really nicely. Okay, I'm going to go into my top view again. And so now I have my support point right over the centroid, which then basically means that this thing will hang perfectly in the balance. All right, so now I technically don't need the centroid anymore. I'm just going to leave it there for a second. But now I would do my standard procedure that I would do with any kind of 3D printable object where I have these kind of subgroups or subcomponents, as long as they're both solids. So the A is a solid component. This loop here is a solid group. As long as they're both solids, I can highlight both of them, and then I can go and find the outer shell tool in SketchUp. And that's of course, actually let me pull this out for a second. It's of course under the solid tools, and I believe it's in there somewhere, right there. There's outer shell. Okay, so now I'm going to do that, which then fuses these two together. And I'm just going to move this away so that I have a second copy. Now I've created that pendant in a way that it will hang in the balance based on that. All right, so there's a little bit finesse to that, because technically we're adding material, so sometimes you need to kind of double check things. You can actually always then do the same process on this combined new phase where again you consider all the internal openings. Now you got 3 of them, and you get a new centroid, and you'll just double check whether you're still at least roughly on. Of course, this is all a scale thing. If you have something that you need to support that's very large compared to the hanging bit, then you may not need to adjust it much. But now in our case, I added material, but not fully, because I removed some material here where they overlap, basically. Anyways, so that's one way to create anything that hangs, whether it's a pendant or whether it's actually a mobile, or any kind of a large sculpture or something like this. You can very easily work with the Face Centroid extension to make it hang perfectly in the balance. And same procedure as what we did. Typically, one thing that you don't want to do, and actually this is something that I tell whenever we do something like this, is, let's cut something out here. Actually, this is not going to fully work. There we go. Let's do that. And I'm going to get my Centroid. Okay. So if I wanted to have this piece hang in this orientation, then of course, if it's a thin piece, I could go ahead and I could put a hole there. And now I have it supported at the centroid, which will, support it in balance. However, the problem is that the shape will always want to, find a certain balance depending on how you push it. So there's no inherent balance. So for something like this here, same approach that we did earlier. Try to move the supporting point, and I made it a little big actually. I would make it smaller ultimately, but try to move it up a little bit. Once you move it up, then it'll always balance itself out. Now this is not a great example, but but you get the point. You usually want to have the supporting point above the centroid, because otherwise that balance won't stay the way you designed it. All right, so that's one part. That's basically how to create a pendant or anything that needs to hang in the balance as a single piece. All right, let's take a look at a whole name in a second, and I'm going to do it over here to the side. All right, so what do we do when we want to have a whole name? And I'm going to be fairly neutral, and I'm just gonna pop this name there. Okay, so here's a name. And again, pick the font you like, pick the sizes either now or just later. Okay, so when you do something like this here, you can't just create a 3D printed object out of this, because now you've got some gaps. So there's a spot right here between the H and the R where it barely touches. The I is of course not attached, so you need to at this point find a way to fuse things a little bit. And my go-to is basically to now carefully separate the letters and then overlap them a little bit and then fuse it. So what you want to do here is, of course, you want to push the C a little bit into the H. That'll give you a flat bottom here too. So that's one thing. And then maybe move the R a little back, or another option is you can fill in material by adding a round right there. So that's one option. Then over here, you could build out the bottom line and fuse these two together. And then of course with something like this I, you can either add a small bridge, just simply draw something and keep it there. Or another way to doing it is just something like that, where you basically then overlap it enough so that, it's readable as an I, but it's attached. All right, so that's one way you can make something like this. And And depending on what your letters are, of course, this may be easier or less easy. So let's give it a quick try here. Not fully sure how well it's going to work, but I'm going to move the eye up. And then I'm going to highlight just the front faces. I'm going to just do a rough copy paste and I'll put it over there. Okay, so now I don't have the thickness, but I can always get that back in a minute. But I do have the front faces. So here, now moving won't help, of course. Now I'm going to do that. The age is fairly separate, so I can actually just go ahead and clean this up here a little bit. Whoops. That'll do. There we go. Get that back in. And now I'm actually going to go ahead and group these already. There's a group. There's a group. And there's a group. Okay, good. And now, of course, it'll help me to move that back down there. And of course, all of this will be much easier in top view. But you get the point. Now you can go ahead and, decide how far you want to overlap these. I'm going to do something like that. Can actually try now to make these two even. And then I'm going to overlap here. And, as with any font work, you're going to want to keep your positive and negative spaces somewhat nice. And then this one I'm just going to overlap. Maybe with a little gap. Right there. Okay. Well, that's not too bad. Now I can go ahead and explode all of those. And then out comes the big eraser, and I am going to fix things up. And again, things like this here that you want to fix, make it as clean as possible. That can go now here. I'm actually going to fill in that way. Okay. Okay, and then over here. That looks good. Now here actually I'll keep this little dip in the bottom because then it gives it a bit more definition. And then up here we're going to get rid of those. Okay. So that's not too bad. Whenever you do something like this, when it's supposed to be printed as one piece, then you're going to have to fuse it one way or another. Another way to doing this is to add a big bar on the bottom and just, have all the letters sit on that. But this usually works as long as, there's enough material there, because you don't want to have it too weak so that it can bend. Okay, so that's that. And now, of course, I can, push-pull this again to any thickness, and I can work off that. But now I've got to make a decision whether I want to have a single support point or whether it's actually, supposed to be part of a necklace with two support points. For a single support point, same procedure as what we had earlier. If I single-click my face, this is now one large face with lots of surfaces, but I can single-click it and then right-click, get face properties, draw crosshair, and we know it's right here. So this is how you can now go ahead and, of course, do the same procedure that we did earlier, where you would do something like that. Oops, that was wrong. because I need it on this one here. And I'm going to just group that. And then, oops, this is going to snap onto something that I don't want it to snap onto, but basically now I could use this to fuse these two pieces together. Oh, this is starting to get a little messy, but in principle this works. I could also go up and just have enough overlap there, because again, I don't want to remove too much material, because then the whole thing is slightly out of balance, and I'd have to redo my centroid again. But that's one way to approach this. Another way is to not let it balance itself out, but rather add two of these, and then of course we need another one on that side, and then you would try to overlap these. Actually, this is starting to get messy, so I'm going to get rid of my centroid for now, because now I wouldn't need it actually. And I can build it up from there. So now I can actually just explode this. Clean that up. Give the whole thing a thickness. And send it to the 3D printer right there. So that's another way to approach the whole thing, but again, at this point we're not balancing anything, we're not using the centroid, but you can of course do that if you so desire. And now with the centroid extension, you can do that fairly easily, and without that you need to come up with a different workaround. Somehow this I dot is a little big. I would actually have made that a little smaller in retrospect. But in any case, up to you. One quick caveat is once we go 3D with this, like different thicknesses, for example, for the different letters, then the centroid calculation gets a little bit trickier. Because it's based on one face. These fused faces work really well with it, but anything else is a little trickier to do. But you can then combine things, of course. Okay, so then, of course, when you're ready to print this, you go to File, Export, 3D Model, and then you make your way to STL, and export only the selection if you have multiple things like what I do. So you can do that. Then that can go to the printers, or on the web version you can just download as an STL. I believe on the web version you will need to take that piece and make it a separate file before you can actually download it. But it's just as simple as doing that. And then same as always, of course, double check that it is 3D printable. So now in my case, of course, something went wrong and it's not. So at that point, going to the solid inspector, whether it's on the web version, where it's built into the tool trays on the right, or whether it's the solid inspector extension that you would have to load into your install SketchUp Pro. It basically does the same thing, but it'll find any issues with it. You typically can fix it if it's small stuff like what happened here. And now it's a solid group, and now it will 3D print. Okay, so I hope I have given you a few ideas for gifts for upcoming holidays, I'm assuming. But in any case, feel free to use this for other things too. Mobiles, anything that hangs can usually benefit from you knowing where the centroid is. And I hope you'll have fun with these techniques.